software call into it. So damn you, Microsoft. Okay, I'm going to touch a little bit on Fortnite's creative mode, but I'm also going to do a little bit of a slow introduction to the Unreal Engine. What I want to show, especially for those of you guys who've done a lot of work inside of creative mode, but have never ever touched sort of an SDK, a software development kit, or even looked at Unreal, or have no clue how you would make a video game, I'll talk you through it. All right, and it's pretty fun, actually. You guys are lucky that you are in a generation where a lot of the tools are accessible, they're free, they're really intuitive and easy to use to a certain degree, but I'll show you, right? And I'm serious when I say a lot of the stuff that you do inside creative mode is very similar, not a stone's throw away from the kind of stuff you would do in a game studio, right? So let's take a look at that. It's kind of cool, too, because I will be using this as a correlation to Unreal Engine, but this game is also produced by Epic. So I'll talk a little bit more about the Unreal Engine in a second. So let's take a look at episode 3. That sounds good. Let's pop in there. The episode naming convention doesn't really mean anything. It's just out of habit. What we're looking at is just a big old grid. So at some point, I probably want to put a respawn down here somewhere. Let's figure that out, actually. I haven't really tried it. Just a little background, too. This is, I could count on one hand the number of times I've been in creative mode. So I'm sort of trying to intuit my way through it. So let's take a look at our inventory. Now, in terms of devices, this is probably where we have our trigger volumes and things like that. I'll explain all that kind of stuff in a second. But there should be a spawner here somewhere. Some of you guys who are old hats at working in the creative mode are probably like, it's right there, man, it's there. But let's see if we can track it down here. So we got this looks like a spawn pad of item. That's an item spawner. Let's see if we have there's an item granter. If not, it's not a big deal. We'll just pop in and start taking a look at some stuff. So in terms of the, that's a class selector, capture area. These look like spawn pads. Player spawn. Hey, there we go. So let's equip that. And then, oops. Right. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Place and hold. Can we not equip this? Let's add this to a chest. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I was hoping to be able to add a player spawn here somewhere, but I'm not quite sure how we're going to endeavor to do that. See, I was expecting this, right? Where we've got those slots where we can just hold down Y and we could place this guy down. But it doesn't look like we have that. Unless, can we go? It's just equipping more and more of these guys. All right, that's cool. Let's come back to that because really I just want to come in here and start building a few things. So the galleries are kind of cool because they are libraries of assets, and we're going to start talking about how we would possibly terrain our environment. So the first thing I generally tend to do is think about sort of the terrain pieces that I have to build out my environment or area. So we've got a couple of terrain type galleries that have rocks and boulders. That's primarily kind of what I'm looking for. I generally tend to look for rocks and boulders before grass, simply because the rocks and boulders are more sort of featured props. They really kind of stand out. They're identifiable landmarks, right? So it's oftentimes a little bit better to place those until you get a context for the world that you're trying to build. I'm just having a quick browse through some of these guys. Natural Rock Gallery. That looks pretty good. Let's equip that. And, oh, no, actually, now I want to dive into it. So when I come over here, I can hit the Y button to go in there, and I can take a look at a variety of different rock pieces. Now, that rock formation looks a little bit too identifiable to me. So I want to grab a bunch of rock pieces that are a little bit less signature. So let's pop that in there. And actually, I like this one here. So let's pop that in there, and we'll stick that in B, and we'll come back out here. Okay, so there are a few interesting sort of features that I stumbled upon yesterday when I was mucking about with this with my kids. So if I hold the left trigger down and we bring this rock down, we have our right and left button that does our rotationals, right? We also have the ability to push this further away. So if you're trying to place it, you know, if it's like you're right on top of it, it's very difficult to place, you can send it back. The shadowing on the ground is an elevation signifier to me, so I can tell if I've actually put it on the ground or not. And then we've got the ability to change our rotational axis from yaw to pitch. And then when I click the right D-pad again, I can roll the prop, right? And we can see that it honors collision with the ground. So it's preventing ground collisions and things like that. So I can hold this to reset my rotational axes. Now I can also set my grid snap increments, right? So now we're at increments of 16 and then increments of 8, right? But for sort of detail work, you probably want an increment of 32 and then ultimately, an increment off. So it's interesting when I click the rotational axes and it goes from roll to pitch to yaw, the gizmo or the little tool that appears shows you which way that rotational operation will take place. Now, if I go to my resize now, let's bring that guy back. So if I bring up my resize, this is my scaling axis, right? So now you can see that the D-pad controls have changed, right? So I can click the right D-pad and I can resize the width of this guy, right? Which is cool. So I got a little bit of shaping. I can resize the depth of it and I can resize the height, right? Or I can resize on all axes, right? So the rotational axes and the scaling axes, they're sort of important operations when you're placing props and things like that and sort of laying out your environment. Obviously, the move tool is the character, which I think is really cool. It's a lot of fun. So, yeah, let's just pop this down for a quick sec. So I'm going to pop you there, right? I'm going to come out of here. So the one thing to be kind of wary of when you're scaling props is what's called texel ratios. Well, what is a texel ratio? Well, basically, the only thing you need to know for now is that if you go too big or too small, or if you go rather too big, a lot of the textures on the rock are going to start looking blurry and fuzzy, and it's just not going to look right. So I'll show you as a quick example. I'll pop just the default rock down here, and we'll come out of it, right? And then let's come out of this tool, right? So it's not too bad, but you can see when I look at the area right here with the scaled up rock, you can see we've got aliasing or stair stepping. You can see the little dots of the pixels there. Whereas if we come and look at this, I guess we see a little bit there too. The thing that the Epic guys have done is they've limited the scaling anyway, so I can't make this super ginormous rock because it would just be completely off. I'll show you. Let's try it. So I'm going to hold down my creation tool. We'll go back into this ginormous rock, and I'm going to hit B to get into my resize. Oh, I got to hold it. Dun, dun, dun. Right. So I'm going to hold that resize, and let's see how far we can take this. So let me push this guy out. I want to see if I can go even further. Can I? No, I've hit the upper limit of that scaling operation. Let's plop that down, right? And then come out of the tool, right? So there we go. We can see, I do want to just come out of this. We can start to see that the texture gets really kind of fuzzy and blurry, right? So I'm just laying down rock formations, and I'll probably come out here and sort of figure out what I want to do in terms of creating this environment. This grid and this cloud and skyline are what we have as sort of a default environment. It's interesting that we have water. Now, a lot of game SDKs will provide this sort of flat island thing. We'll take a look at Unreal Engine in just a second here. But I remember, I don't know if Unity still does this, but CryEngine would plop you onto a grid with just an ocean extending out everywhere, right? So my friend John used to say the CryEngine is just an island building game. But if you think about it, guys, everything's pretty much an island. We are surrounded by water on all sides. But I get what John's saying, right? If I wanted to build a cityscape, how much of that, the resources is that water taken up in terms of sort of processing, CPU usage, RAM kind of usage, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's just sort of a brief look at the scaling and the rotation tools inside of the creative mode. Let's pop out now. I'm going to Alt-Tab, and we're going to take a look at the Unreal Engine. So a little bit of a background on the Unreal Engine, right? The Unreal Engine is a development kit that is free to download. Free, right? And it's got all these professional level tools and functionality where you can pretty much build your own AAA game, right? So if we take a look, this is pretty much what we get. We get that flat grid, and we get our sky dome, and that's it. So this is where we come in and we start placing our props and building it. Now the UI, for those of you who've never seen it before, might seem really intimidating. What's all this stuff going on around here? Don't worry about that. We'll get into that as I start kind of talking you through the comparisons between creative mode inside of Fortnite and the Unreal Engine. But let's take a look at what we can do in terms of prop placement, right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to, let's take a look at some static meshes, right? So we've got plants and stuff here, right? And if I double click on it, a little preview window will pop open and we can come in here and we can take a look at our plant, right? So this is very similar to just hitting that Y button once you get into a library and getting individual pieces, and then you can grab that and you can drag that and drop that into your world. Oh, a little bit of lag. A little bit of lag because I got Unreal Engine and I've got Fortnite running at the same time, right? So we can place our tree in this environment. We can also pop back out and take a look at, let's see if we've got any other, let's see, plains, background, flora, organic ruins, statue, terrain. Let's take a look at terrain. So we've got one terrain piece here. And, yeah. Well, actually, let's take a look at something a little bit better than that. I just want to get some individual pieces here. Not that particular. Let's see what our statues are doing. Okay, so let me go to the static meshes. Yeah, okay. So we got a, oh, it's giving me question marks. I will deal with that later. Okay, we are losing our texture connections, but that's okay. I'll take a look at that in a sec. That's kind of cool. Okay, so let's drag this guy, pop him into place, right? So again, we got a lot of the same functionality. We've got access to sort of keyboard controls. You can also plug in an Xbox controller as well if you'd rather kind of navigate that way. But I'm using the WASD first-person shooter keys, right? And we have the ability to do our, we can translate this guy up and down. We can rotate this guy. And we can do all kinds of stuff. So I just want to give you a background of some of the things that you can set up in advance. I just wanted to give you a taste of the kinds of things that we do. So a lot of times, especially as a level designer or layout artist, what you would generally tend to do is go into the Unreal Engine environment. You'll have a lot of existing props that the prop department has placed in this sort of content browser for you, and then you just dress up your props. Very, very similar to what you do inside of creative mode in Fortnite. And that is a position that you have on a team, a layout artist or a level designer, right? So let's talk a little bit about, let me come out of here for a second and see if we can minimize this guy. All right, so I'm going to pop into the Epic Games Launcher. So if you're interested in kind of taking a look at the Unreal Engine at a very sort of basic level, I'll be walking you guys through it in this channel. But when you go to the Epic's website to download it, let me just bring it up here, actually. Let's do this properly. Let's take it from the top. Okay. So I'm going to come over here, and if you type in Unreal Engine, right, you will get this Unreal Engine, the most powerful real-time 3D creation package on the planet. Right? And again, it's one of many, right? There's the CryEngine, which I think is now Amazon Lumberyard, and then there's Unity. But Unreal Engine, I think, is my favorite, just for ease of use, and they've just thought a lot of things through, right? So you'll have to sign in for an Epic account, which if you're playing Fortnite, you've probably already got one, right? And then when you head on over to the download section, you can choose the free-to-use, 100% royalty-free creator's license, right? So once you click on that, you'll get authentication required. So you log in using your Epic ID, right? I should already be logged in. If not, I will just pop over here really quick and log in with that one. But like I say, your PlayStation or Xbox login account should suffice. I've read and agreed to that. So once you get that, you'll get the Epic installer downloading. You can see down here in the corner, the Epic installer, the MSI. And that's just one of those double click and it'll install for you kind of deals, right? So there we go. I'm going to cancel out of that because I've already got it, right? So I'm going to cancel this guy and I'm going to back out of that. So what you get are two things. You get the Unreal Engine and you get the Epic Games Launcher, right? So with the Epic Games Launcher, this is what you get. It's basically a hub of sorts. Let me move this guy over here. Right? And so you'll probably land on like a homepage or that kind of thing that has all the news that's of things happening at Epic. But what you want are these two areas here, the Unreal Engine and the library. So in Unreal Engine, this is where you go. You can also download the engine from here, but you can also directly launch the Unreal Engine from here. This is probably where you'll spend a lot of your time if you want to build your own games. We'll get into sort of that a little bit later. There is a Learn tab, which I highly recommend as a good place to start, right? So this will give you direct access to Unreal's official tutorials. They're not really geared for kids. They're a little bit, yeah, actually, you know what? You guys might be into the get started with Unreal Engine 4. It's fairly straightforward. They give you a bunch of assets to start, right? So you can play with these guys. You can place them and just learn how to navigate inside of Unreal. And they've got sort of content examples and things like that. So if you wanted to take a look at how to build your own lights, how to build your own particles, they give you ready-made examples that you can deconstruct if you're like a deconstructing type of person, right? So that's kind of cool. And my favorite place to start is down towards the bottom, right? So here, Epic gives you a bunch of games templates for you to be getting on with, right? Which is really cool. So you get an action RPG. The shooter game is not bad. The environment props are pretty cool. And the vehicle game as well is all right. And they give you vehicles, they give you environment props, and you can place them, and you can create your own levels and all kinds of stuff, right? So it's really, really quite cool. The marketplace, generally, you can come in here and take a look at companies that sell asset libraries and things like that. There are independent artists as well, putting freelance work up here and charging for it. And there's also a huge, huge library of free content, right? So you can come in here. Well, here, case in point. This month, I grabbed the Drivable Cars Basic Pack. That's cool. And the Materialize VFX, right? So that's awesome, a little teleporter. And the Modern City Downtown, right? So these are really, really cool kind of things that you can download, and you've got all those assets for free. So you can start building like your epic downtown city chase, car chase thing. All the props are there, and etc. Right? So then we've got this library here. Now this library is your own personal library, what's loaded on your system currently, right? So it's showing me that I've got an old version of Unreal 4211. I'll probably uninstall that. And then the most recent 4243, right? So here we can also add engine versions, right? So there's 425. I can install that as well, right? And down here we have the projects that I've currently opened. So there's a couple of gray box test areas that I've been using for lectures and things like that. So that's there. And then there's my vault, right? This is where you'll probably enjoy collecting all the tools and assets that you want to start building your game. So the very first thing I grabbed was the boy and his kite, because the mountain terrain and the woods and the forest and the running creek and all that stuff, amazing. And I can't believe they're giving it away for free. It's amazing. And then just a bunch of characters, because I wanted to take a look at how they put their characters together, how they rigged them, how they animated them, and all that kind of stuff. Virtual cameras. I've got that vehicle game and the shooter game down here as well, right? So there's a lot of free resources for you guys to kind of be getting on with. But that's the hub, right? The minute you launch or install one of these engines, you will get the most recent one created as an icon on your desktop. This is where the magic happens, right? So when you double click that, that brings you into this, right? And you can start creating your levels inside here with the props that you have been provided from the free libraries, right? That's pretty cool. That's pretty sweet, right? So I'm going to go back into the environment, and I'm going to look for, let's take a look at, let's see if we can find, those are decorations, breakables, static mesh breakables. Okay, cool. So we've got things like this, right? So we can place those, etc. You know, and you can see why I was so excited about starting this series talking about the creative mode, because this method of kit bashing is something that we do inside Unreal Engine, and is also something that you can definitely do inside of Fortnite's creative mode, especially when you're pre-visualizing your levels, or you just want to kind of create something and test out its playability first. Now, it's incredibly narrow. What I mean by that is it's pretty much for third-person shooter, battle royale type games set in a modern context, slightly cartoony, right? So it's a very, very narrow scope. But it's a good area to kind of practice in and get some of your ideas down and things like that, right? So one of the things that, if we pop back into creative mode, one of the things that it allows me to do is take a look at this very, very intimidating flat space and just try a few ideas out. One of the biggest difficulties for layout, especially if you're not working off any kind of concept art, is just looking at this blank grid and going, well, what the heck am I going to put in here? Now, we'll talk about references and things like that in a minute, and where you can get ideas and inspiration. But this is definitely an area where you can let your creative freedom sort of fly, right? And then you can take that same sort of layout and rebuild it inside of Unreal. Now, here's one of the advantages of working inside of creative mode, right? Because look how far those rocks are. I can gauge that distance quite well. And when I drop my character down, I can feel, you know what? It's taking far too long to get through there. Can I run through there? Oh, it's not bad. The spatial relationship works okay for the third person game that I have in mind. Not so easy with this, right? So you'd have to sort of come down here. Let me get down. Ooh. Right. There we go. I gotta set the speed of my camera for a sec. But here, I've got no real way of judging how far away those props are, or how long it's going to take me to travel over there, or if my character can squeeze through there, or even how big my character is. There's no sort of relationship. Oftentimes we'll bring in a character prop that's built to scale, and we'll just chuck that character prop as a little statuette in the scene somewhere, so that we can figure out what our scale is based on the character. But come on, guys. That's way more fun to just pop in here and go, yeah, I can run through that. That's cool, right? And it just helps you figure out things like navigability, jump distances, all kinds of other stuff, right? So it's a really kind of good area. I'm going to be dragging my class in here later this week, and we're going to be exploring a few ideas on this blank canvas, and I will keep you guys posted. So